Have you ever noticed that your happiest moments have come when eternity almost seemed to get inside of your soul? Time demands that you take all of your pleasures successively. And time not only gives them to you, time also takes them away. And thus, if you examine your own psychological intuitions and experiences, you will discover that your happiest moments are those when you were never conscious of time at all. When you were in school or perhaps in your office, you look at the clock. You were not enjoying the school, you were not enjoying your work. Maybe you are attending a concert or enjoying a conversation with friends. And you say, time passed like anything. The less conscious you are of the passing of time, the more you enjoy yourself. There is a hint of what heaven must be. It must be outside of time, where you can possess all joys at one and the same full moment. Well, that's the condition of happiness. But though it is outside of time, you have to use time in order to get to heaven. Now, we too often think of heaven as being way out there. We draw all kinds of pictures about heaven. Most of them are quite unreal. And because we think of heaven, and even hell, as something that happens to us at the end of time, we keep on postponing it. As a matter of fact, heaven is not way out there. Heaven is in here. If you ever want to see heaven in a child, look at that child the day of his first communion. If you want to see how much love is related to heaven, just look at a bride and groom at the altar on the day of the nuptial mass. Heaven is there. Heaven is there because love is there. I've seen heaven in a missionary nun. Yes, a missionary nun who was spending herself and being spent among the lepers. Sometimes you see a virtuous young person, and you see heaven there. The beauty of such a person is not put on the outside. It is a kind of an imprisoned loveliness that comes from within, as if it were breaking down the bars of flesh in order to find some outward utterance. So heaven is here, just as hell can be in the soul of some. It's here. That is to say, it begins here. Hence, those people who deny hell by saying, well, I believe we have hell in this life, are quite right. It starts here, but it doesn't end here. Heaven starts here, but it doesn't end here. We just get faint glimpses of it now and then. But if we postpone the thought of heaven until the moment we die, well, we will be very much like the Israelites during their wanderings in the desert. The poor Jews were at one time within about 11 days of the promised land. It took only 3 weeks for them to make the journey from Egypt to the promised land. But because of their disobediences, their failures, their backsliding, their rebellions against Moses, it took them about 40 years to get into the promised land. And that 40 years represents a pilgrimage in the life of most of us. We make progress and then we slip back. Thank heavens we have a merciful Lord who puts up with us and forgives us 70 times 7. And therefore, time is necessary in order to gain heaven. But the lapse of time itself does not bring me to heaven. What brings me to heaven is how I live, how I die. And we are not to think either that just one particular act is the sole determinant. We are determined by the habits of our life. For example, a great pianist may sit down at a piano and strike a wrong note, but you will say, oh, well, he has the habit of being a very good piano player. There are, however, so many men who try to immunize themselves from those thoughts of eternity. They put on a kind of a God-proof raincoat so that the drops of His grace would not get through to them. They shut out eternity. Now we come to what our Lord said about heaven. Oh, He said many things about it. But there is one moment in His life that I think is very precious. It was the night of the Last Supper. Here our blessed Lord gathered about Him all of His apostles, poor, weak, frail men. He washed their feet, and He was facing death, the agony in the garden, and that terrible betraying kiss of Judas, and even the denial of Peter himself. One would think that all of His thoughts would be on Himself. Certainly when we have trials, that's what we think about. And our blessed Lord, He thought about them. He saw the sadness in their faces, and He said, "Be not troubled. Do not be sad. I go to prepare a place for you. In my Father's house there are many mansions." How did He know about the Father's house? He came from there. That was His home. He was the kind of prodigal son that left the riches and happiness of the Father's house to come to this earth and to waste the substance of His life riotously on our salvation. Now, preparing to go back home, He tells them about the Father's house, and He said, "I go to prepare a place for you." God never does anything for us without exceeding preparation. He made a garden for Adam. As only God knows how to make a garden beautiful. And then when the Jews came into the promised land, He prepared the land for them. He said He would give them houses full of good things, houses which they never built. He said that He would give them vineyards and oil, which they never planted. So He goes to prepare a place for us. Now, something that we must remember, too, about heaven is that heaven is social. It's a fellowship. In some places, heaven is called a country to indicate its vastness. It's called a city to suggest the number of its inhabitants. It is called a kingdom to suggest order and harmony. It's called a paradise in order to tell of its delights. And it's called the Father's house to indicate its eternity and its permanence of love and peace. Now, in order to be perfectly happy after the end of the world, we will have to have our body with us, because our body has done a great deal for the salvation of our soul. There we will meet in the fullness of the communion of saints, all of those who were our friends on earth. Husbands who have been grieved in time with the loss of a wife will find the wife. It's hard to lose friends after a time. Two hearts grow together, and death is not just the separation of two hearts. It's the tearing asunder of one heart. Cicero wrote a book in his latter days entitled An Essay on Old Age. It was a poignant story of his heart at the loss of his daughter, Tulia. He said that after his death, on his way to the Elysian fields, if he met someone who would ask him, "Do you want to go back to Earth?" he would say, "No, I don't want to go back to Earth, because I want to go ahead and converse with Plato and Socrates." And we have many, too, with whom we would like to converse. I would like to see Plato, Aristotle, Moses, Thomas Aquinas, thief on the right. I would like to see you, too. I'd like to see you particularly because you have spent so much of your time listening to me. I cannot tell you what it is. I can only ask you to go back and just think of some great moment in life when you really enjoyed the thrill of living. And then to go back and think of some great moment when somebody told you a truth, or you made a study of a great mystery and finally understood it. And then to go to another moment of your life when you had a great ecstasy of love, and you wanted it to go on and on and on. Now suppose you could take this moment of life, raise it up to a focal point where it became the Father. Take this truth, lift it to infinity until it became the moment of the ecstasy of truth, aimed at the Son, and take that moment of love and eternalize it so that it became the Holy Spirit. Well, that would be some dim suggestion of what heaven is. It's perfect life. It's perfect truth. It's perfect love. I'm not afraid of going to hell. I'm only afraid of losing love. That's all. That's divine love. That's Christ. The reason I want to go to heaven is because I want to be with love. Oh, there will be surprises there. Many of them. First of all, there will be many people there whom we never expected to see there. And then there will also be a number of people absent whom we thought would be there. And finally, there will be one great surprise, the greatest of all, that you and I are there. I will see you in heaven. God love you.
Some great reflections by Bishop Fulton Sheen on heaven. I wanted to share about heaven because we are in Easter, and I think we often reflect upon hell and talk about hell, but I think that heaven is not often spoke about, and wanted to highlight some things there. So the first thing that I really enjoyed that he mentioned was how our most joyful times are those in which we don't realize how fast time is going by, right? How many times, as he said, we're looking at a clock, we're not looking forward to work, things are going by slowly, but when we're in this great state of joy, it goes by so fast. And heaven's outside of time. Imagine what the joy could be like there. And this is something that I've heard before, what I'm about to share, is that heaven starts here, right? And I feel like I've heard many times people like, oh, we're living heaven and things like that. And I was like, that's a bunch, that's pretty cheesy, But in so many ways, there is the truth that it starts here. This is not heaven, but it starts here. As he said, it doesn't end here, it starts here. And it's a good reflection, especially like in our own lives, right? What are we doing to make our environment, to make our families, to make our communities more like heaven? And less like hell, right? That's quite a thought, because so many times we may not realize that our frustration and our desire for control can lead to such a state where it's not peaceful to be in, So really thinking about eternity can allow us to detach from that and be more present and more joyful. And I think, as he said, like a kid is just happy, like they don't have any concept of time, and you can see like the pure joy within them. He mentions the first communicant, but I think so much about when you hold a newborn, or 2 years old or 1 year old, and they smile, and there's just that pure joy. you're trying to make them smile and they smile and you look in their eyes and you're like, man, in so many ways, I think that's a great parallel to heaven. I love that and have been blessed to experience it. Now, postponing the thought of heaven. This is really interesting. He talks about that if we postpone the thought of heaven, we just think about it at the end, that may not play out well. And I think this goes to a crucial phrase I've shared many times before. How would this look in the light of eternity, right? We often think about the moment. We think about now. We're distracted by a lot of things. We're very busy. It's a very busy age. How many times have you talked to someone, hey, how are you doing? Oh, I'm so busy, right? And that busyness often prevents us from thinking about our end. I think there's such a need to do that, to reflect upon that. So maybe in this Easter season, you can think more about eternity. On Sundays, my wife's family is so good at this. Her dad, awesome about having Sunday being a day of rest. And to truly have family time, that was something I didn't grow up as much doing. And that's something we try to incorporate in our own practice, is having Sunday be a day where we reflect and just do nothing so many days. It's been really great just to sit there and be with kids and be with friends and family and just enjoy each other. Because in so many ways, that is what heaven's like, right? Now, this quote here, my favorite thing that he said in all of it.
There are, however, so many men who try to immunize themselves from those thoughts of eternity. They put on a kind of a God-proof raincoat so that the drops of his grace would not get through to them.
Isn't that amazing? How the drops of his grace will not get through to him. Now, it's really easy to think about people that are like that, but I think we also especially need to think about ourselves. In what ways are we blocking the grace of Jesus, not being open to his will? Because even in micro ways, that's how we can do. So before we look around and look, there's a person who is blinding themselves to God, not open at all. Let's think about the own ways in our life where that happens. At the Last Supper, Jesus thought about us even before his death. That's crazy. Think about all that he could have thought about himself, all the agony he was going to go through. But he thought about us. I'm going to prepare a place for you. I'd never heard that before and thought about that, how even in such a tough time, he was focused on us, what love there is. And finally, I loved this element, how heaven is social. Fulton Sheen talked about that. And I think that points to how we should live now, right? Do we just go to church and run out afterward? I made videos on this. Don't do that. We need to build up the church on earth, right? Because how odd would it be for a soul to go to heaven and realize that they have not really connected with anyone on earth? They didn't have that desire. The desire to connect with people on earth leads to, I'm sure, amazing reunions in heaven. So I hope you enjoyed Fulton Sheen's thoughts on here. Please like this video and share it. Have a blessed day, and God love you.